I am a lifelong resident and historian of Tillsonburg, Ontario. It is said that Mary Ann Tillson, the wife of Tillsonburg's first mayor and founding family, attended a lecture by Oscar Wilde in Woodstock, Ontario, on May 29, 1882. For me, this was an incredible connection between our town's history and the world-renowned playwright and late Victorian caricature of flamboyance and wit. Oscar Wilde travelled across North America for the full year of 1882. In the late spring he journeyed to Canada and had a number of speaking engagements through Ontario. Arriving in Quebec, he spoke 2 nights in Montreal and 1 night in Quebec City. He began his Ontario excursion in Ottawa, moved west to Kingston and Belleville, then Toronto, Brantford and Woodstock, finishing in Hamilton before returning to the United States. He came back to Canada in October that year and graced the Maritime provinces with his presence. Interestingly, the hotel where Wilde spent his night in Woodstock, the O'Neill House, later the Oxford Hotel, is still standing just across the road from the museum. Sadly, many of the opera houses in the other cities where he visited through Ontario have been demolished, removing a tangible glimpse and connection to Wilde from their communities. I love the entrance doors to the Museum of Nature in Ottawa, writes Paula Brown. The ornamental moose heads between the archways is the perfect Canadian flourish. Scarborough, Ontario's Alan Cheng captured this seemingly endless series of doorways while strolling through a museum. Thank goodness for the numbers, it looks like a place that would be easy to get lost in. Although this door is set in an old farm shed, that gorgeous shade of green is inspiring us to give our own front door a makeover. Thanks to Robbie Gore of Petawawa, Ontario, for sharing this colour cue. It's easy to forget how grand Canada's Parliament buildings are, until people stand in the shot for scale. Melanie Corbin of Plaster Rock, New Brunswick, snapped this impressive pic on a visit to our nation's capital. The Gardner-Dunton House was built in the 1840s, writes Karen Allin, whose photo hints at the historic structure's glory days. It sits on the property of Peel District School Board, in Mississauga, Ontario. It looks cold enough to see your breath, but this red door still seems to be basking in the sunlight. Thanks to Linda Sweeney of Miramichi, New Brunswick, for submitting this fantastic photo. Enter, having a particular fondness for old barns. This is one of my favorites, writes Kim Ross of New Minas, Nova Scotia. Located in the farming community of Gaspereau, Nova Scotia, this barn has been standing for many years. Many of the older style barns had hay mows on the second floor, as does this one, with a door for getting the hay in and out. I love the faded red paint and rusty old hinges showing the wear and tear of the elements over the years. The bonus in this shot is that I got 2 doors for the price of 1. This immaculately restored old warehouse wouldn't be out of place in a bustling European port. But as photographer Marie-Alice Wood discovered on a stroll through Vieux, Quebec, it's very much on this side of the Atlantic. James Pollock's shot of a door at the Bothwell Oil Museum in Chatham, Kent, Ontario, is as pretty as a painting. From the incredible textures of the worn and weathered planks to the reflection of the fall foliage in the glass, it's a bona fide work of art, a fresh new look. Getting a facelift in downtown Toronto, writes photographer Brenda Snape of Aurora, Ontario. The elaborate Corinthian capitals on those columns are well worth preserving. Brittany Walker of Melita, Manitoba, says, I travelled to St. John's a while back and while there, snapped this picture of a colourful door in the downtown area. St. John's is a beautiful, one-of-a-kind city filled with colourfully painted homes. On a visit to Ottawa, Cindy Mulvihill of Low, Quebec, was struck by this impressive arched doorway in the East Block building of Parliament. The blackened stone, wrought iron lamp posts and stained glass windows create a real sense of majesty. You'll find this eye-catching red door at Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. It certainly caught the attention of Shutterbug Marie-Alice Wood of Langley, BC. The Kelowna, BC, train station boasts this brightly painted door, which caught the eye of Shutterbug Maria Powell, dealing with a dark and gloomy front entrance. Here's a surefire fix: cover every square inch with a coat of sunny yellow paint. Edmonton's John Schnell snapped this unabashedly cheerful doorway on a visit to Banff back in 2010. This old granary has seen better days, but Rebecca Bromberger's photo manages to capture its weather-beaten beauty. The cheerful paint job on this little shed is sure to put a smile on your face. Thanks to Rosa Cross of Tancook Island, Nova Scotia, for sharing this sweet photo. Between the brilliant emerald hue and crab-shaped knocker, this home's entryway has curb appeal in abundance. According to photographer Ruth Boudreau of Brasdor, Nova Scotia, it's one of many doors in Lunenburg with a nautical theme. In lieu of more conventional studs, this handsome wooden door boasts elaborate decorative florets. Cindy Herbert of Welland, Ontario, discovered this hidden gem in the base of a statue in Niagara Falls. Sometimes it's not the door, but the gorgeous wall mural renders this back door very nearly invisible. Sherbrooke, Quebec's Russ Hayes snapped this stunning artwork on a stroll through the streets of Toronto. With its distinctive full moon cutout, this shed door bears more than a passing resemblance to a birdhouse. By the looks of the rusted hinges and peeling paint, any former residents have long since flown the coop. Thanks to Bonnie Dominix of Harbour Mill, Newfoundland, for sharing this wonderful shot. When Frank Koenig of Morinville, Alberta, spotted this wacky-looking abandoned building, he knew he had to take a snapshot. Although the hinges are, somehow, still holding, the planks that make up the door itself have sagged over time, creating this eye-popping effect. Isn't it curious how the lines still manage to match up, even though they're no longer perfectly horizontal? Although the intersection of Yonge and Eglinton is a cluster of steel and glass skyscrapers, Toronto photographer J.M. Fontaine exposes its gritty underbelly in this moody shot of a derelict doorway. Mary Ann Tillson encountered this cheerful installation while walking through the beautiful town of Elora, Ontario. "Such a unique and colourful way to use old doors," she writes. "So many wonderful things to see and do here." Cindy Herbert of Welland, Ontario, didn't have to travel all the way to Middle-earth to find this hobbit hole. The enchanting door is set into the trunk of a tree in Winnipeg's Assiniboine Park. "This creative project was done by a man in my community who wanted to fill a hole in the tree trunk," writes Paula Eves of Sarnia, Ontario. "It was a very popular spot, but unfortunately, the tree recently had to come down. We can't help but wonder where the inhabitants have moved to. Have you seen any of these fairy doors spring up in your neck of the woods recently?" Erla McCormick says this photograph captures the doorways to her world. "Through the smaller doors lays my world of home. A place I care for my son, Chris, along with my dog, Chewbacca, and cat, Trouble," Erla writes. "Behind the garage door is my salvation. Why, you ask? Because it stores my classic, 1962 Pontiac Tempest Lehman's convertible. Candy apple red. When I am out driving in it, sun on my face, wind in my hair, all of my worries disappear. So both doors are very important, especially in today's crazy world. This camp door is certainly showing its age," writes Kim Ross of the beloved property at Fisherman's Reserve, 3 Fathom Harbour, Nova Scotia. "Built about 150 years ago, it's still standing, albeit a bit weatherbeaten. I love the battered look of the door, every inch of metal rusted by the salty sea air. Even the window has survived, quite a feat given the high winds that come in off the Atlantic Ocean. Where else but Quebec City could you find such impressive classical detail? The ornamental millwork on these doors is nothing short of breathtaking. Many thanks to Kitchener, Ontario, photographer G. Wong for sharing this beautiful shot." Alan Cheng of Scarborough writes, "In the summer of 2012, while vacationing in PEI, I snapped this photo at a gas station near the town of Borden-Carleton, the starting point of the Confederation Bridge on the island. The bright white door stood out nicely against the vivid green of the wall." Napan, New Brunswick, has become one of my favorite places to explore, shares Kathy Martin of nearby Miramichi. "Most of the time, I take landscape photos of sweeping fields, the river or farms, but I discovered this gem along the way." David Lee of Chilliwack, BC, captured this great shot of a cabin that was part of an original stagecoach stop, located behind the newer Ashcroft Manor Tea House in Ashcroft, BC. Robbie Gore of Petawawa, Ontario, writes, "I snapped this pic of the front door of St. George's Anglican Church in the village of Portage du Fort, Quebec, as part of a series of photos of old churches and cemeteries that I took in that area." Rosa Cross of Tancook Island, Nova Scotia, writes, "Growing up on Tancook Island during the 60s and 70s, it seemed that a lot of houses had these aluminum screen doors with the initial of the family's last name in the center. Alas, the C pictured here is not for Cross but rather Crooks, another Tancook family name." Linda Swans of Burlington, Ontario, writes, "This door is very unique. Not for the door itself, but the house it belongs to. It is the entranceway to an old silo. The silo was converted into a very extraordinary castle home. It can be found just outside Elora, Ontario. Was smitten with Karen Allen's." Shot of the massive front doors of Toronto's St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, Vanessa Vincent shared this striking detail shot of handsome door hardware against a backdrop of brilliant red. "Isn't it incredible what a fresh coat of paint can do?" Photographer Rosa Cross writes, "Rocks rolled in along the beach to make this door impassable. We just hope nobody was inside at the time. Maybe this spooky abandoned estate would make the perfect setting for a mystery story." It certainly makes an atmospheric subject for Sean Fitzpatrick's skillful photography. Although Toronto's Distillery District is most famous for its annual Christmas market, its historic architecture makes it worth visiting year-round. These black steel doors set into a sea of red brick make a striking subject for G. Wong's camera. Glenn Holtzhauer of Cambridge, Ontario, shared this pretty pic that he captured in Quebec City back in 2011. "Those little wall-mounted planter pots are such a charming idea. While walking the streets of St. Jacobs, I came across this beautiful door," writes Brantford, Ontario, photographer Mary Ann Tillson. "Between the intricate glasswork on the side lights and transom, and the warm and welcoming wreath, it's easy to see why it made such an impression. Those salvaged shutters are just aching to be reinvented as do-it-yourself room dividers, but, in this museum's multi-purpose room, nearly 140 years ago, Oscar Wilde pontificated on the evolution of modern culture, fashion and decorative arts. Borrowing from the contemporary arts and crafts movement, he promoted the usage of handcrafted furnishings. Patrons were encouraged to employ local craftspeople and use local materials. This was a reaction to the artificiality of mass production of the late industrial age. There was a growing rejection to the dark and stuffy, cluttered curtained rooms of the mid to late Victorian home. Wilde would become famous for modernizing art initiatives and theories towards the aesthetic art movement. This type of design and decoration was based on local trades, geometrics which would later connect with the Art Deco period, images and interpretations of flora and fauna. These could be accomplished by incorporating organic-looking carpentry, metal work and stained glass into the home. The aesthetics movement touted that beauty should be seen wherever you look. Homes should be bright and with evidence of nature's splendor on the inside of the home. The Tillsons employed these properties into their magnificent home. The exterior of the house is made up of polished blonde brick from the Tillson brickyard. The front hall uses local wood with varying hues, creating unique geometric patterns. Images of flowers and birds adorn the ceilings of the dining room, parlor and library. You can look straight up from the grand staircase and see the painted parrot on the third-floor ceiling. And, as an homage to Wilde and his favorite flower, you can find images of sunflowers often. Wilde's legacy has grown over the years, but the memory of his appearances in North America, particularly in Canada, have been largely forgotten. Tillsonburg and Woodstock have direct connections to the man and his influence on art and culture. It is a pleasure for this historian to introduce you to accessible locations that you too can discover, associated with Oscar Wilde, in small-town Ontario.